The Constitution was hailed by national groups as one of the best, perhaps the best, Constitution in the country.
They viewed it then, as I think many do now, as probably the best Constitution of any state. And that fact was a very persuasive indication that indeed we were capable of governing ourselves.
Voters went to the polls and overwhelmingly approved the Constitution. They also elected to send 2 senators and a representative to Washington to lobby for statehood. The delegation would be voteless, but the message would be clear. Alaska is serious about statehood.
And every day, why these 3 gentlemen were on the floor or visiting each of the congressmen and each of the senators, and it was that kind of pressure that brought about the debate that we needed to have control of our resource base. And the big debate was, well, they can't take care of themselves.
In 1958, their work paid off. An extraordinary statehood bill came before Congress, a bill that would give Alaska a way to pay for statehood. It would transfer more than 100 million acres of land and minerals to the new government, the largest land grant ever given to a state. It also pledged 90% of all revenue from oil, gas, and coal on most federal land.
What they did is they said, not only will you own the resources on your own land, but you are going to own 90%, you're going to have a 90% beneficial interest in the natural resources on our land, on the federal land.
It would be the last statehood bill for Alaska.
It was a very emotional time because everyone realized if it was not voted through, the legislation would die, because that was the end of the second session. It'd have to start all over again.
Well, it was some kind of a shock to me. I sat up in the press gallery of the Senate when they took the roll, and I was surrounded by all these newspaper guys I knew. And before the roll was completed, they were quizzing me, what are you going to do now in Alaska with all of this? Now it's going to be a state, what are you going to do? And here, I had this emotional response, which was quite, I can't talk about it. My throat tightens up when I do talk about it. But it was, it put the monkey on our backs here now to perform. We have to do all these things we told them we were going to do.
I was in Washington in the galley when the vote was counted, and some of those people like Senator Cotton looked up there and went like this and waved at us.
The Senate turned around after the bill was passed and applauded the gallery. They applauded the people.
The bill would become law only if Alaskans approved it. And once they approved it, it would be unalterable unless both parties agreed to the change.
Senator Butler, before he died, he was testifying. He wanted me to stand behind his chair, and I did. And some of the things they talked about was that this is unusual legislation, and the colleagues better understand that it cannot be changed just by a vote of Congress. It'll have to have the approval of the people of Alaska.
Secretary of the Interior, Fred Seaton, traveled the state talking to Alaskans, making sure they understood the terms of the contract. Seaton told Alaskans, the act reaffirms Alaska's preferential treatment in receiving 90% of all revenues from oil, gas, and coal leasing on federal land. The additional costs of statehood will be more than offset by additional revenues made available to Alaska.
And he talked about things like the 90-10 and the fact we would have the money to pay for government. That was very important to them, to pay for government. Now, what did we do? In fact, the entire statehood compact was published in most of the major newspapers so that the people would have a chance to read it. Are we getting the picture here that this is a contract? And then we voted to accept it.
The vote was overwhelming, and that meant that that issue that passed Congress was no longer just an act of Congress. It became a contract between the peoples of Alaska and the United States government. And it went into effect on January the 3rd, 1959.
Alaskans accepted the financial burden of statehood because they believed the contract gave them the means to pay for it. With the Statehood Act, Congress promised Alaska 90% of oil and gas revenue from federal lands. But the federal government has since locked up millions of acres of its land, in effect saying Alaska gets 90% of nothing. ANWR is a case in point. Experts believe a major oil field lies beneath its coastal plain. But the federal government has blocked oil and gas development in ANWR. It's estimated $29 billion of oil off limits to Alaska. The lawsuit filed by the Hickel administration asked that the state be compensated for $29 billion in lost revenue.
What's it worth? $1,000 an acre? $100 an acre? What's Prudhoe Bay worth? Now there's 200,000 acres of Prudhoe Bay. If they'd have taken that, what's it worth?
But the issue goes beyond money. The suit seeks to preserve the achievements of one generation of Alaskans. With the statehood contract, that generation established the rights of Alaskans to have a say in their economic future. If the federal government can arbitrarily change the terms of a contract, no state's rights are secure. The state filed suit to make the federal government live up to its promises and to defend what one generation fought 15 years to win. For the legal challenge to succeed, this generation of Alaskans must understand what's at stake.
I don't know how you can explain it unless it's to make the individual realize that his ability to make a living is being jeopardized. If you want to become one of those exhibits for tourists that they point their little cameras at and take a picture of the inhabitants, unless you're looking forward to that kind of future, then that is all that is left to you.
The lawsuits are real. They're there for the students of the future and the past to study, to see what was granted to us in that compact and why we have to defend it.